get a little bit more of a serious tone here, Jeff. When it comes to the homeless issue
Mm-hmm.
in Brandon, it could be summed up maybe as a sign of the times, essentially. Combination of inflation, maybe some other more serious issues such as broken homes, even drug addiction comes into play. The truth is most every city is dealing with the growing problem of homelessness. It's not just an isolated problem, it's right across the board. What are your plans to deal with this problem that is affecting more and more people with each passing year?
Yeah, so that's huge. And you know, when it comes to, I think at one point, if we had done this a lot earlier, you were going to say, what do you do on your first day? Well, on my very first day after meeting with Rick in here in the morning, I was at the Samaritan House.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we needed to talk about a couple issues that were really hot right then. We needed to get that extra space for people. And I would say most of my time as mayor is spent with social service things. Like that, because that is a big, big issue. We don't really do a lot of the work, but we have to know what everybody is doing. We have to know how we can help them, how we can speak with them, for them to the province, how we can help work together. So a lot of what we're doing right now is setting up how do we do social service better. Brian Schumbardt from Prairie Mountain Health is just a massive asset. You know, and Chief Balkin has been working with us. We've got things like the hub. I don't know if people know about that, but get Janice on your show because to tell you all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of news, but it is a big deal. It's a very big deal, and even internally on that, there's a lot of seniors that are in the shelter. Like I go down to the shelter a bit, and I know what's going on there all the time, and you know, and so even with our BUPAC, like we want to talk about, you know, how do we find Indigenous seniors housing? When we go to talk to the minister in Ottawa, like that's the kind of thing. Like there's got to be things in place that we can help there, and it is growing. It's not an industry you want to grow, but it is, and it's like other industries. When you're a community that is the sort of the area that brings everybody in, it brings everybody in. It brings the business in. It brings more people and all people. Like we have better services here for people that need them, and so we have more of them than the rural community. Yeah. And that's why we do work with the problems on it. It is probably my number one thing that I work on.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, keep up the work, and hopefully problems don't get to the point where you're needing even more assistance down the road.
Yeah. Well, we do have a sobering center coming one day. It is coming, but the timing is, oh my goodness, the timing is brutal on it. But we have housing that is coming to get into different bits of housing. But again, working with these community people, like there's millions of dollars that come into the city for housing. There's groups that do that, and they work together really well. It doesn't come through the city. So we have to know, okay, how do we help you guys to enhance what you're doing, making sure that we're doing the best we can for everybody that needs it.
Jeff, let's backtrack a bit to the budget and talk about Brandon's financial house and how to maintain having things in order. Shortly after he was elected, your predecessor, Mayor Crest, hit Brandon homeowners with a huge hike on their water bills. Do you have any plans like that moving forward? And I know you probably have an explanation on that.
Yeah.
So enlighten us.
Yeah. So of course, and we've talked about how that happened. So there's a few things. One, we don't do utility rate studies frequently enough. So we're going to be doing them more frequently. So what happens is you kind of freeze in a rate for 5 or 6 years, and of course when you freeze something, rates go up. So you have this big jump.
Right.
And then this last one, we actually ended up freezing it a little longer than we intended. Well, not that we intended, but COVID started.
Right.
And so we were supposed to have a rate study done that would have increased water rates. And we thought we don't want to put that on people, and so we held off to see, where is this COVID going? We didn't know, like nobody knew, but we just knew timing didn't seem to be right to do that.
Okay.
Now, of course, we run deficits during that time,
right?
And those deficits have to be paid off, and then we take on the biggest infrastructure project the city's ever seen with our water treatment plant. Okay. So then you apply to the PUB, the Public Utilities Board, and they make your water rates.
Okay.
And so they came back and said, okay, with your borrowing you're going to need to do with that, with your debt, you're going to need to increase it, which was over the course of 4 years, possibly. And this hasn't come back yet, but we expected up to 100% increase, which does make it reasonably expensive from what we're paying now. Across the province, it's still quite manageable, but we're just used to what we do here, not really caring what everybody else does.
Okay.
So there is that, and it is a correction that needs to be made. That water, the treatment plant is the big driver of all that, and we need that, to continue. It's our water treatment plant. It's got to take us for another 50, 60, 70 years. And the guys in the 50s and the 70s in Brandon put a lot of money into infrastructure back then that we've been living off of and tying into and not paying. And so we are at a day now, we're at capacity for the city for wastewater and water. We got another year and a half of development, and then we're done. So back in that day, either do we think about the future to keep building or do we not? And we have to make those choices. So water rates are going up mostly based on deficit and the Great Big Treatment Plant. Mm-hmm. Taxes probably are going to have to balance off at a little bit of a higher rate. We're doing a 4-year budget now. We're going to start doing that. We've never done that before, but other places do. Winnipeg just came off of one that was 2.5% increase every year for the last 4 years. They're starting on one that's 4 years of 3.5%. Mm-hmm. We're going to be able to do a longer-term forecast, and it may come in more than the 1.6 over 4 years, every year. But we'll be able to try to justify that, and it'll keep us in a good place to make sure that we're not having to go low, and then a big correction. So people and business and everybody can kind of budget what we're doing and know that we're not going to have to go to the tank for too much.
The clock is ticking on our water infrastructure. You just pointed that out. There's talk, many discussions about the South End expansion. So that's got to play into that somehow. Where do we go from here? If we got a year and a half, it's getting tight. If you're forecasting a large increase of people over the next 10, 20 years in the city, they're going to need those services, and how does that play into everything?
Well, it's significant. It's very significant, and it's a fundamental decision, I guess. I don't think we realized it was going to be as big of a decision as it's been playing out, but partly that's back to that communication. And we've been trying to communicate for a decade. It got your souped on us like it was something it wasn't, and that does cause us a grief, and we don't have the communication team necessarily to get back. So we're as open as we can be, but there's other communities around us, and they're what people call those sort of rural communities that are all across the prairies and that are slowly dying, because they need to come up with the money to expand or not. Mm-hmm. And they're smaller than us most of the time, but if they don't, then it's just raise your kids and they go away, and house prices go up because you got no new ones, so your market gets smaller. So our housing prices would go up. We would do more infill, but we were doing lots of infill, but they would go up in price because that's the market. If you have nowhere to go, you build it in here. So all of a sudden we would be paying more and not increasing our base.
But I read recently there's been a downward trend in housing completions across Manitoba, whether it be housing or apartments or condos or whatever. Not a sharp trend down, but it's going the wrong way. But I drive around the city of Brandon, I see a lot of buildings popping up. Where are we sitting in that trend? Is Brandon somewhere in the middle? Are we on the right side or the wrong side?
There's an upside to Brandon and kind of Manitoba to a degree, in that the ebb and flow of the economy. We just we always hover just above a recession in Manitoba. We're not Alberta. We're not Alberta. We're not Ontario, where it's a good times are really good, and when it gets bad, it's bad. Mm-hmm. We always seem to be a little ebb and flow. And we've been on a great run here for years and years and years, and we're steady. We have a very steady flow. We have increased the density a lot in the last number of years, and that's conscious, because if you go back 10 years ago, we started saying we got to do something, because we know that this is we're going to run to capacity. like, and it's now. So that's why it took us probably 6 or 7 years to get development cost charges in place, to have sort of new development pay for new development in more, because historically it hasn't at all. This is the first time we've ever had that happen, like where development is paying for more development. And then we also consciously back then said we need to do more infill, we need to do more density, and we've been doing that. We earmarked to try to do 20% of our new builds there, and it's been over 30. And you drive around, and historically there wasn't a whole lot of 4-story buildings even in Brandon, but there's a lot now.
There are.
Like it's not an uncommon thing, and so the density is good. But it's a whole picture. And are we a community that's continuing to grow, or not?
Well, you know, Brandon has always been looked upon as like a retirement community. I mean, it's right there in the moniker, the wheat city, and we're ag-based, and you know, how does that sit with you? How does that classification of a retirement community / the wheat city, how does that sit with you?
You know, I'm
wheat
good-
city
I'm
is
good
more
with
like
it.
almost like a branding thing, right? It's,
Yeah.
like it's a marketing
Yeah,
term.
you know what? And I
Because we're ag-based here. So.
I'll tell you my thoughts on that.
Okay.
We are a bit of a retirement community. Like that is part of our population growth. Of course, we have an enormous immigration population, which is great, and it creates a real urban center and a real life to the city. We are a retirement population. You know, there's a lot of rural communities that they retire and they end up coming to Brandon from the north, from all over the place. You know, family might be here because we were the growing place versus places that may not be growing as much. And that's a huge asset to us as well. But the wheat city, like I actually like that. Everybody wanted to be the new Silicon Valley. And the reality is the wheat city is agriculture.
Yes.
And if you want to get into agriculture, you got to be pretty high tech. You go to ACC, you look at what they're doing. Like it is big industry, it is high tech industry. It is like the most AI is going on in agriculture versus other things. If you're going to see vehicles that are driving without people, it's likely to be a combine before it's cars. You know, like we are on the cutting edge of very high tech stuff, and so the wheat city. Yeah, maybe people, when they think of it, they think of, oh, it's old farmers around there. But I'll tell you what, those farmers are pretty sharp cats, and they have big operations, and they have big businesses, and it's a good thing to be part of. And an old friend of mine, Bob Mikulski from Brandon, he's a marketing professor at McGill, and he always loved the idea of the wheat city. Own what you are, you know?
Bingo. Perfect.
So.
I like that.